Hello babies and welcome back to my channel. I'm David, you're David, we're all David, and welcome to Dismantling Hate, the series where we look at some hateful online rhetoric. And today we are going to look at the YouTube channel of Daily Wire. The video is called I Became Transgender. Here's why I regret it. If you love the sound of my voice, consider subscribing to the channel, like the video if you like the video, and let me know what you think in the comments. And babies, before we get started, please do not go leave any hate comments on any of the individuals that I feature in my videos. My content is meant to be educational and a little bit entertaining, so please do not participate in this culture of hate we are trying so diligently to dismantle, not only on this channel, but around the world. So I'm gonna slide myself over and we're gonna figure out why this specific person regrets being trans. All right, I'm ready. Are you ready? It's okay if you're not. We'll take a deep breath. It's gonna be okay because we're gonna do it together. Roll the transphobia.
I lived 8 years as Laura Jensen until I woke up and realized that it was totally insane to live this out. The first time that...
Yeah, real quick hard stop, being trans is not totally insane. It might have been insane for him, which means like nonsensical. But yeah, interesting. Strong start here on Dismantling Hate, I must say.
Happened in the 50s was Christine Jorgensen, but Jenner took it to the next level. And then 2015, it began to explode.
Are you a woman?
Yes, for all intents and purposes, I am a woman. My brain is much more female than it is male.
Ladies and gentlemen, the courageous, the stunning Caitlyn Jenner.
We're ruining an entire generation of children. I find even hearing about it and reading about it so repugnant.
No, not Nina West. It's not, we're not ruining children by playing dress up. Like, but then it's very conflated here, right? Are you talking about drag? Or are you talking about being trans? Those things aren't mutually exclusive. Sure, there is some overlap, but it's not the case for everybody. And it's not an entire generation of children. Even if the trans ideals or the trans ideology that the woke teachers are pushing on the kids, which is not the reality. If you're interested in my take on the teachers of all of this, see the Dismantling Hate playlist. I also have some podcast episodes that relate to my experience in education. I'm also a university educated teacher with almost 7 years of post-secondary education, one of which is at a master's level with a specialization in neuroscience. So I don't come at this from nowhere. I do have experience of this. And even if even if it is all fake, even if it is all wokeness and that G word that rhymes with rooming, it doesn't affect everybody. Even if that was the case, it's not ruining an entire generation of people. It's just all this it's just all this outlandish language in place of actual morality in order to appeal to emotion, which is manipulation.
Destructive to children.
Trans members of this family all love each other.
A trans beaver? I don't think. Like, who cares? Who cares? Who cares? All the beavers I know were trans. All the beavers I know were gay. They're building dams. It's woodworking. That's lesbian coded. That, of course, is a joke. That's a joke. For all you nutheads in the comments, that's a joke because we're here for comedy and also education.
So proudly, and they all...
Bringing drag performers together with little kids is kind of a perfect relationship.
There are people whose gender might be a little bit of both or might even be neither.
And it's time that this stuff needs to end. We need men and women to step up and say, stop this nonsense.
Like, I don't just want to play on the fact that this person is older, but like, we need men and women back when men ignored their emotions. Like, people can play dress up. That's really the crux of what drag is. It's dress up, but these people have a problem with it because it's embracing femininity, and femininity is often what is seen as weaker, as less valuable by a lot of these people that share these ideologies. So let's keep going.
I was born and raised in Los Angeles, California. You know, my upbringing was pretty much a typical California upbringing in Los Angeles in the early 40s. It wasn't really anything remarkable. At least not until my dad began to take me over and drop me off at my grandma's house. Grandma was a seamstress and made dresses. And I became very curious about her work, and my curiosity led to her making me a purple chiffon dress that she made just to fit my perfect little 4-year-old body.
They're playing like sad music in the back as if this is like abuse, but how is that like, they're framing this in the way of like, gender is so fragile, and if you put a boy in a dress just one time, he's gonna turn out to be trans. That's not the case. Like, effectively, that's just dress up, and unless somebody's forcing you to be trans, nobody's forcing you to be trans. Like, putting somebody in a cute little dress is not transing them. It's just not the reality. It's just not the reality. I was in dresses when I was a kid. I'm not trans. I'm not a trans woman. I am under the trans umbrella, but even that is argued, and the existence of non-binary people is usually argued by these folks, but that's not what we're talking about right now, so we won't.
At first, it felt really exciting to have somebody telling me how wonderful and cute I was. But what I didn't realize was happening is the second Grandma began to tell me how cute I looked in that purple dress, what she was really saying was that there was something radically wrong.
No, that's not what she was saying. That's interesting. So maybe we need to pump up boys a little bit more and be like, you look great. But I think the difference here is the sexism that goes on between, oftentimes when people are complimenting men and boys, it's usually the qualities of their character. So like, you're really resilient, you're really strong, you're really funny. But then when it comes to complimenting women and girls, a lot of the times it has to do with their appearance. Like, you're very beautiful, you're very stunning and gorgeous, and you're a model and all of this. And that's really what he's illuminating here with that, is maybe he was a young boy that was dying for some compliments. And then when he started to get compliments, then maybe that influenced his way of thinking when it came to expressing himself as a trans woman. So I don't think, like, no, that's not the subtext here. Also, it's really, really interesting. It's really, really interesting to hear this. Like, if he's talking about his grandma, that was a long, long time ago. And the fact that his grandma was part of a different generation, but still like was okay with boys participating in femininity, that's really interesting. This isn't an example we often see in this kind of framework. So yeah, I'm happy we're watching this video. I'm glad you're here. Thanks for being here. I'm having the best time.
Little boy that I really was. And so that begins this sort of creepy kind of psychological and emotional destruction that starts within.
Okay, it's a lot of big grandiose language in place of actual morals. It's not psychological destruction. Are you flipping kidding me? Like, maybe you were manipulated into being trans and you weren't trans. And you know, if you've spent any time on my channel, you know what I think about this. But in particular, you may not be a trans person and you would live your life as a trans person. And that if that expression is not meaningful or authentic to you and you go back, that means that, in my opinion, that means you were probably never trans. You were just living in that identity. I don't think necessarily it's not a choice to be trans, but it is a choice to live in your authentic self. So maybe he was living in an inauthentic way based off of the perceptions and ideals of the people around him. That's definitely a possibility, but then that illuminates the fact that we need to be teaching children to have discernment skills and critical thinking skills. Not that we need to be shutting out a diverse gender expression and boys can't participate in femininity. That's not the lesson here. The lesson here is to develop critical thinking skills, because that would have helped this man.
A young boy, 4 years old, who doesn't know what the consequences are going to be about putting on a dress at 4 years old and keeping it a secret from my...
Is that really so consequential? I don't think that is. I remember my Oma put me in a dress when I was really young. If I can find it, I'll put in a picture here. And like, that didn't make me queer. I'm sorry, that didn't have such an effect on me. You know, what did make me queer was the underwear aisle in Costco. So maybe we should be focusing on those people. Again, it's a joke, because this is comedy. You know, I'm a comedian. I'm just another woke lefty comedian out here making jokes that... Anyway.
For nearly 2 years, until I became so accustomed to wearing that purple dress that I decided to take the dress home so that I could put it on when my parents weren't watching or when I was alone, and I could sort of listen and hear those affirmations. I became sort of addicted to the affirmations. And
again, critical thinking skills, right? You shouldn't be keeping secrets from your parents. So I think that's a bad culture to be perpetuating here. And he's not perpetuating that, but in general, sometimes it is like, oh, don't tell your parents. But if he would have brought his parents into this conversation, if he felt safe to do so, because he was part of a generation where queerness and femininity, when you're a masculine person, was something that was looked down upon, and maybe he would have been shamed or even worse for participating in those things. But if he would have brought his parents into that conversation, maybe they would have been better able to assist him in realizing that he wasn't trans. He just enjoyed participating in femininity at that level, because it's not the same thing.
Say how cute I was. So I had the purple dress at home, but my mom...
He was addicted to compliments. He likes compliments. Everybody likes compliments. Give boys compliments. Give girls compliments. Give non-binary people compliments. It feels good. That has nothing to do with you being trans, my guy.
Found it in my bottom dresser drawer. And she said, well, where did you get this dress? And I said, well, Grandma made it. And that just blew the house up. My dad was upset. My mom was upset. It was supposed to be a secret. I broke the secret.
Again, that is traumatic to be putting a child through. I hate that. You should never be keeping secrets from your parents. And in the way of, like, as another trusted adult, asking somebody to keep a secret from somebody who is so important and integral to their life, like a parent, it sets the kids up for failure. So I hate that. This is an adverse experience, and I can have empathy for this person, but my empathy is guided by my discernment, because now he's taking his experience as a young person who thought he was trans, and he's putting it on everybody else in the world who is trans. And your experience is valid, but that doesn't mean everybody else's experience is the same thing.
As a result of that, I could not go back to Grandma's house without my mom or dad being with me. Dad didn't know what to do. His mother-in-law had just been cross-dressing his young boy. He was so angry at my grandmother that he took his anger out in his discipline on me, and he started hitting me with a hardwood floor plank when I would do something wrong. Sometimes
it's tragic and horrific, and I hate that this happened to that person. That is absolutely horrifying and wrong. But I do think there's something to be said about the impact that that kind of abuse has on a young mind as well. So I think we shouldn't be ignoring the fact that this child thereafter endured abuse and how that potentially could contribute to participating in a gender identity that was not authentic to this person. I wonder if this person would have been trans if the parents found the dress and they were like, oh, cool, put it on, let's see, twirl around, girl. All right, what do you want for dinner, right? Like the encoding of that experience of like, oh, this is something so wrong. And it's like the petulant teenager, right? If you tell them, don't smoke, don't smoke, don't smoke, they're gonna be like, oh, wow, what's smoking? You know what I mean? Like you have to be able to have open and honest conversations with your children that instill critical thinking and discernment. It all comes back to critical thinking and discernment.
he was just being way too critical, but it was that what was built up in him because of what happened to me. He did not know what to do. If you can imagine in 1946, 47, there's no information about kids wearing dresses. But the next part of the equation was his adopted brother, Uncle Fred, heard about me wearing the purple dress, and Uncle Fred decided that I was fair game to be sexually abused. Uncle Fred was not playing with a full deck of cards, and he'd get drinking a little bit, and he would come looking for me, and he would molest me. The emotional and psychological issues that I had from Grandma affirming me, I didn't really realize the consequences of those for many years.
No, that's blaming yourself. That's blaming yourself. It is not your grandma's fault. It's not your fault. Oh, the onus of blame does not belong on the grandma or this person who is sitting in front of us. That is so sad that that's how these people think. No, that's victim blaming. That's victim blaming. Oh, this is so sad.
Floor plank obviously was very devastating. And then the sexual abuse was sort of the cherry on top of the cake. I was a broken child before I was 10 years old. You know, I decided that maybe I should have been a girl, not realizing that what I was trying.
But we can't ignore the fact that all of these different kinds of abuse that this man is describing right now might have informed his inauthentic gender expression. How can we be ignoring that? It would be those things. That doesn't mean that nobody is trans, and that also doesn't mean that all people who are trans have went through these kinds of adverse childhood experiences. It's so sad because this man would have quite an inspiring story to tell if he wasn't framing it with transphobia.
It was escape the abuse, not actually change who I was, but it resulted in me going through this process for many years of cross-dressing, going out in public as a female, and so I went through this with even in my first marriage. I had 2 children. I was an executive for American Honda Motor Company. I worked on the Apollo space missions as an associate design engineer.
Cool.
But that purple dress, the hardwood floor plank, and the sexual abuse was about to take everything away. Then the next critical step was struggling with my identity. I went to a gender specialist in San Francisco who promptly identified me with gender dysphoria or gender identity disorder and promptly told me that I needed hormones and surgery. That was the treatment that he was prescribing to help me end the cycle of distress I was having about my gender. Because
I don't know. There's so much context there that we're not privy to make an actual final conclusion of whether that was right or wrong. But I don't think it should be prescribed as the only final answer. I think it should be put forth as an option. But I think there's more options than conclusively offering gender affirming care when it comes to hormones and surgery. I think there's many different ways that you can live your life, and those should be presented to trans people, when they seek help like that, I don't think there's one final answer, but it is an option. And maybe this man felt like he was pushed into it, and that's fair and that's not right. But that doesn't mean that nobody should be seeking gender affirming care.
What happened to me as a young child. The doctor I went to, his name is Dr. Paul Walker. Dr. Paul Walker was a homosexual transgender activist. He felt his job was to do like they're doing today, is to introduce people to hormones and surgery as a process of treatment. Now keep in mind, Dr. Paul Walker was not just your average therapist. Dr. Paul Walker was the author, the primary chairperson and author of the Harry Benjamin International Standards of Care, the very same standards of care that's being used today that's called WPATH Standards of Care. His agenda was pushing transgenderism, pushing surgery, and pushing hormones recklessly.
Is it pushing or is it offering? There's a difference there, but I don't know. I don't know anything about all the things he's just mentioned, so that gives me some direction of things to look into.
And really damaging someone's life like mine.
It can be damaged, but it can also be saved. It depends on the person and what is authentic to them. And the fact that you went through all of this abuse probably impacted the way that you conducted your decision making as an older adult who was struggling, and he was struggling, period. So maybe if somebody put that in front of him of like, hey, here's an option, he might have taken that option as a way out of how he was struggling, but maybe he just needed therapy for the abuse that he went through. I don't know. But I do think that healthcare professionals should be offering a multitude of resources. And to be honest, there are a lot of those things in place. If you are now seeking gender affirming surgery or care or hormones, there is the input from a psychologist, from a doctor, from your primary care physician, by the surgeon, by a psychiatrist. There are so many medical professionals that are in your circle of support as a trans person who may be trans or may be seeking out gender affirming care. You just can't walk in on a whim and get that anymore. That might have been the case then, but it's not the case now. That's not how that works.
Had kind of a devastating run of events. When I was struggling with alcoholism and drug addiction, I went into a treatment facility as Laura Jensen and came out the other side. And I went through a 2.5 or 3 hour therapy session with my psychologist. And during that day, I went through all of the things that had happened, the sexual abuse, the emotional abuse, the wrong idea about going through this procedure, all the things I'd done wrong, the destruction I did to my children and my ex-wife. And I wrote everything down after speaking about these issues, and he put a match to those yellow line paper and in the parking lot, and those papers began to burn, and the wind gently picked up the flame, and the papers were burned up, and it was sort of that cathartic moment where you realized, okay, all of that stuff now is lifted off.
No, it's not. Like, I get it. That can be cathartic, and I've lit papers on fire that I've had things on them that I've written in, like my journal and that, and like, sure, that's catharsis and all of that, but that does not solve all of your problems. That's really harmful to say. You can't just light your journal on fire and then all your problems are fixed. What?
Shoulders. And he said, let's go back into my office and let's pray. Well, I'll be honest with you.
Yeah, okay. Kylie prepped the Jesus kid. It always comes back to Jesus with these people, doesn't it?
Guy prays a lot, and he prays for a long time, and I did not want to go back in and pray with this guy because I figured I'd be there for like an hour praying. And as he prayed, I kept hearing him, and I kept thinking, is he going to end? And then there was a point in time when I couldn't hear him praying anymore. And miraculously, what I saw at that moment that I couldn't hear his voice was I saw the Lord Jesus Christ actually descending toward me.
No. Delusion.
Stretched out. And I looked in front of me, and I saw that he was reaching toward a little baby. And I looked at the baby, and I go, that baby is me. The Lord is coming to claim me.
This is what trauma looks like.
And he turned to me and said, your life will be safe with me forever. And the Lord disappeared. I realized at that very moment, the Lord came to redeem and restore my life so that I will serve him.
No. And implying that you not being trans is like restoration, is participating in the deficit model, and that's gross and discriminatory. That's not how that works. Like,
every day after that date, I wanted to restore my life, bring myself back to reality. So faith,
being trans is not a deviation from reality.
The pivotal role in me being here today. 35 years sober, married 24 years, and I detransitioned over 30 years ago. Thank the Lord, I've been very successful in providing help to many people. I haven't been able to help everybody, but I've been able to help a lot of people, and I'm very grateful for that. And I'm going to continue to speak out. I'm going to continue to work. I'm going to continue to try to help.
You should continue sharing your story, but sharing your story for the intent of making other people not trans when they are in fact trans. It would be harmful to live in, it would be hard. It would be hard and terrible and a third adjective that's bad to live in a gender expression that is not authentic to you. But we should be targeting the people. But it's not targeting all trans folks. It's targeting the systems that allowed you to live in a gender identity that was not authentic to you. And further, it should be looked at all of the mental health supports that this person so desperately needed growing up, going through all the different kinds of abuse that they endured. There should have been stronger mental health supports in place for people going through these, because if he received mental health counseling and support, he probably wouldn't have transitioned, because there were so many problems. And you can't separate some of the problems as if it's not all some conglomeration that is your brain. That's not how humans work. Everything is everything. It's all very married together. You can't just take one piece and be like, yeah, this is what happened and trans is bad. Let's ignore all of these other bad things that could have pushed me to make a decision that wasn't authentic to me. His story is valid and important and tragic, and I do have empathy, but it's guided by my discernment and critical thinking skills. Your experience is not everyone's experience.
People who have no other place to turn. And so I started a website called sexchangeregret.com, and I work every single day with either a parent, a father, a transgender who has regret like I did. I work with psychologists.
It stands to reason that there are trans people out there that regret their gender affirming surgery. That's absolutely a possibility. But when we start to look into the data, people regret knee replacement surgery and hip replacement surgery more often than they do gender affirming surgery. So I'm going to start a website called Hip Replacement Regret. We'll see how many hits that gets. It's just it's good that you're helping people, but you're also projecting your experience onto other people, which is not helpful.
I work with college professors, I work with doctors, I work with lawyers. I am working to prevent people from going through this totally unnecessary, insane surgical procedure, and that's why I'm so passionate.
Yeah, and that is quite transphobic, because he's not saying the caveat that it is something that is helpful to some people, which is what I'm saying here. You might go through this and regret it, absolutely, but you might go through anything and regret it. It has nothing to do with the fact that gender affirming care exists. It's helpful to some, and you saying that your example is everybody's example is just so it's so full of logical fallacies. That's not how this works.
About trying to raise my voice and give people the opportunity.
Come on, Hillary Duff, raise your voice.
To go, wait a minute, maybe this isn't right for me, and I'm gonna.
Okay, for me, but is it right for other people? Come on, he's so close. He's so close.
Continue doing it until the Lord comes and takes me home.
And yeah, that's exactly it. It's all framed from this frame. It's all framed in this idea of religion, which is what makes this problematic for me, at least in the most part.
That's my mission, is to stop people from unnecessary surgery and stop the advocates from lying to people about them being able to change their gender.
Gross. Just another impossible watch by the Daily Wire. All right, babies, that does bring us to the end of this episode of Dismantling Hate here on my YouTube channel. Consider subscribing to the channel if you enjoyed this. See my Dismantling Hate playlist. There are a lot of other episodes for you to get into if you're interested in that. Leave a like if you like, and let me know what you think in the comments. I'd love to know. If you love the sound of my voice, you can check out my podcast called Detalk with David Day. You can watch it on YouTube or listen on Spotify, and become a certified amateur sleuth and click on my link tree and follow me on Instagram and TikTok. Thank you so much for getting to the end of this video. I really do appreciate you being here. You look amazing today. I love you, babes, and until the next one, goodbye.